explain a sociological change we are experiencing by now in Switzerland. Until 30 years ago, Switzerland was an entirely Christian society, always with a small Jewish minority, but of course the customs habits there were Christian. And since the last 30, 40 years we have strong immigrations with people coming from other parts of the world and bringing with them their religions and their cultures. And our traditional system of law and religion regulation must now be adapted to these new customs. Today, in this year, we have about 70% people coming from either the Catholic or the Protestant church. We have 4.5% Muslims in Switzerland. They often come from the Balkans or from Turkey, so they are quite close to European culture. We have a growing number of people who declare that they have no religion. And then we have about 5% people from different, smaller religious communities like Orthodox churches, smaller Christian churches like Baptists and Methodists, also some Hindu and Buddhists. And the Jews in Switzerland are 0.2%. About 18,000 people. I always ask my students, do you think how much Jews there are in Switzerland?
250,000.
Yes, and the answer is in this direction, because nowadays Jews are part of our culture, and non-Jews are not aware that there is such a small group. Okay, what we see by now is, on the one hand, the development towards growing religious diversity, not Christian anymore only, and on the other hand, a large-scale secularization. About 20% of the population have no religion, and in the huge cities like Zurich and Geneva, it may go towards 50%. And this questions our legal system. One hand, we have to open our jurisdiction on religious freedom, and on the other hand, we have to think over the competency of the cantons to rule the religion-state relationship. The first thing, of course, we have the guarantee of religious freedom in our constitution, and the jurisdiction was adapted so far to Christian problems. But in the last year, we see more and more that the courts have to decide on cases where new religious communities are involved. The members of these communities, they meet at school, in the hospital, in the army, in the prisons, rules and customs which are in many ways influenced by the secular state, or then by the norms and values of the traditional religious communities. And this creates problems which the courts have to decide on. And several judgments of the last years concerned Muslims in public institutions. Question: has an Islamic girl to take part together with boys in swimming lessons at primary school? And the first answer of our Supreme Court was no. A strict interpretation of the Quran is respected here. Some surah in the Quran say that girls have to cover their body up from a certain age on, and more conservative Muslims interpret this saying that mixed swimming lessons are not allowed. And a second answer of the Federal Supreme Court, 20 years later, was totally different. Now the court says the integration of the child in school is more important. Here we see an interesting change of perception of the course in this question. The first judgment was some way good-willing and open toward the attitude of the conservative Muslims, and the second judgment takes much more into account that the primary school has a very important role in integrating children from different cultural backgrounds. If children are not integrated in school, where will they be integrated later on? when they're adults, they go in the different styles of life. A second case of the court. Can an Islamic female teacher wear religious clothing at public primary school in Geneva? And here the answer was no. This would have a too big influence on her students. At primary school, children are in an age where they can be easily influenced, and so the duty of neutrality of the state is here especially strong. This decision was widely discussed, and there were also different opinions on it. But of course, if a female student would like to wear a scarf, it would in Switzerland cause no problem. We have here a different concept as in France. France has a strict concept of laïcité, that religion cannot be visible in the public sphere. Here in Switzerland we have no problem with this. So no questions about wearing a kippah in a public institution. The Swiss would have no problem with this. A second interesting development concerns the cantonal competency in religious state regulations. Actually, the Constitution says that the regulation of state church regulations, as it was called, is a cantonal matter. Cantonals, these are the local entities you might have heard of, and we have 26 of them. So actually we have 26 different systems of states religion relationships. Is this complicated? Yes, definitely it is. But on the other hand, this gives the possibility to create tailor-made statutes for religious communities based in the canton. And this concerns, between others, also the Jewish communities in the cantons. I must explain. Religious communities either are incorporated in private law, or then they are incorporated in public law. In the second case, they have a particular statute which gives these religious communities some privileges, interesting privileges, like they can offer religious teaching at public schools, or they can send their ministers to hospitals and prisons for the pastoral work, and often the state pays the wages. Or a third privilege is that these recognized public communities can raise church taxes from their members with the help of this state. And so far, only the two big Christian churches were recognized as entities of public law. But in the last 10, 20, 30 years, we see that also smaller religious communities obtained this statute, and the first one were the Jewish communities. In 6 cantons by now, the Jewish communities are now recognized as such religious communities with a public status. As an example, here in the canton of Vaud, but also in the canton of Bern. And the canton gives these communities a tailor-made status for the needs they have. As an example, in Bern, the rabbin of the Jewish community of the city of Bern is paid by the state, because the state also pays the priests and the pastors of the Christian churches. So it's only logical that at this time the rabbin is paid by the state. So the canton of Bern has an official rabbin. This is special. A third tendency is what we see persisting or new discriminations of smaller religious communities. And here we come to examples Alberto already mentioned. One example is a newer one, the interdiction to create minarets for mosques. And an older one, and for you maybe more interesting, is this interdiction of religious slaughter. Switzerland is one of the few countries in Europe which has an interdiction of religious slaughter. This is an old interdiction. It dates from 1893. It has remained in the Constitution until 1973, so for nearly 80 years. That was, of course, shameful. And then it was put on a little bit more discreet level in the law of animal protection. Switzerland, in the meantime, has found a pragmatic solution. Jews and also Muslims can import kosher and halal law, and to do this from France, from Strasbourg. In the meantime, this discrimination remains. Some years ago, a federal councillor tried to get this law abolished, but this stirred up intense discussions. And in discussions, it was difficult to see what is now animal protection and what is anti-Semitism. So it is a very, very ambiguous topic. And the federal councillor, he asked the representatives of the Jewish communities, does it make sense to go on with this debate? And the president of the Federation of the Jewish Communities of Switzerland, he said, no, you better leave it as it is, because it will stir up too much anti-Semitic feelings by the population. We better live with this more pragmatic solution by importing kosher meat to Switzerland. And what we see here is actually something very interesting. We have a direct democracy in Switzerland, a long tradition. And by this direct democracy, the population can get some topics into the political debate professional politicians would never treat. This anti-minaret interdiction came through initiative and in aid of religious slaughter. So we have some research being done under the title, is actually direct democracy some sort of terrorism from the majority towards religious minority? This danger always exists. To summarize, one can say actually we do not have enormous problem with the integration of religious minorities in Switzerland, but on the other hand there's also some bémol, as the French dare say. We also have these dark parts where there are still existing discriminations of religion minorities as Muslims, but also as Jews. Thank you very much. So